Hello, today I'm going to review Bob Dylan's album Street Legal. Now, I have done a review of this album before, but it was several years ago, and I didn't have a microphone at the time. It was one of my early efforts, so I think it needs to be revisited. And the other reason for revisiting it is I've just bought the new vinyl. So, which shall I show you first? My old, not my original vinyl. Which the difference being has the lyric sheet in it, which seemed to come with most copies. I picked up a Yugoslav copy the other day and that had the lyric sheet in it as well. The new vinyl doesn't, which is a bit disappointing. And you can compare the cover. It's a little bit, maybe a better quality, but mainly just less faded perhaps, a little redder, the skin colour and stuff, but not a huge improvement. And as for the actual record itself, I'm pretty sure that they are using the 1999 remix as opposed to the original remix, because the sound is a lot clearer and it matches that version on the CD which I have from that remix. Although strangely, no remix activities is credited on the back. This is just a straight copy of the original sleeve from what I can see, word for word. But the reason I can tell it's the remix, apart from it sounding better overall, is Changing of the Guard is that half a minute longer on this, and on the 99 CD the fade out is extended and superbly, because that instrumental fade out is one of the highlights of the song with the organ. Great band of people on here. Started off by being kind of leftovers from the Rolling Thunder, and then ended up being pretty much a new band. So Rob Stoner was originally on bass and he dropped out, and the drummer Howie Wyeth, the desired drummer, was originally set to be included, and he dropped out because he was struggling with a heroin addiction, which I didn't know. So they brought in Jerry Sheff on bass, who played with Elvis Presley in the 70s. And by the way, Elvis died a few months before this album came out, and Bob was very moved by that and decided to arrange some of his new songs in the kind of style that Elvis had been doing in the 70s in particular, with a kind of big band sound and a saxophone. Ian Wallace was brought in on drums. Not to everyone's pleasure. Rob Stoner said he had a beat like a policeman, but I think he drums pretty well on here. Maybe not as imaginatively as Howie Wyeth on Desire, who had a lovely natural flair for doing fills and stuff, like Black Diamond Bay. It's just inspired. But this is a decent band. Billy Cross on lead guitar. This album features a lot more electric lead guitar than the previous two albums had done. Planet Waves had featured Robbie Robertson, but Blood on the Tracks and Desire, not much lead guitar on there, but Billy Cross is all over this album, playing guitar solos on True Love Tends to Forget, and he's playing good electric guitar on We Better Talk This Over, and just trying to think what else has a guitar solo. Senior. So yeah, percussion, Bobby Hall, Steve Douglas on tenor and soprano and saxophone, rhythm guitar, Stephen Souls, backing the violin and mandolin, David Mansfield had replaced Scarlett Riviera, Caroline Dennis, Joanne Harris and Helena Springs on backing vocals. And a couple of those ladies would continue into the gospel years as well. And Helena Springs co-wrote a couple of songs with Bob, which didn't feature on Street Legal, but turned up on here. Eric Clapton's 78 album Backlist. Pretty sure both songs are co-written by Bob and Helena Springs. To this day, I've never heard Bob's original demo of either, and I think that it would be priceless to hear them. Maybe they must be out there somewhere. I remember Eric Clapton in an interview saying, because Bob gave him a tape of 4 songs and said, do what you like with them, and he recorded 2 and maybe did record the other 2, but he didn't release them. And Eric said in an interview round about the time whenever I get depressed. I just remember I've got this tape of 4 Bob Dylan demos, songs which nobody else in the whole world has heard, so that cheered him up. I'm sure it did. So Bob is embarking on his first world tour for 12 years around this time, 78, and Japanese promoters in particular were encouraging him to do some of his older songs, so he obliged, but with a condition. In true Bob Dylan style, he rearranged most of those songs so the Budokan versions, some of them are reggae'd up, some of them are faster, slower, just all of them different, and that makes for a pretty fascinating listen, and most of that band was carried over onto this album, although not all of, because Rob Stoner I think was on that tour and he dropped out. Also in these sessions I was interested to read Jesse Ed Davis was involved for a while, and Denny Sywell, formerly of Wings, was involved for a while, and the reason he was let go is because he couldn't get a visa to come into the US, I think it was, or no, into Japan, sorry, because he'd got busted for pot with Wings in 1972 or 3. So it would have been interesting to hear the finished album with Denny Sywell on drums, but it's not to be. As I say, decent band, very decent lyrics. And the other thing to mention is, well, there's always decent lyrics on the Dylan album, but in particular on this very mixture of personal songs. He was going through his divorce with Sarah, pretty much been confirmed by the time the album came out. And Sarah got custody. They were fighting over custody, and so Bob was in a pretty bad mood. So even with the players assembled, Dylan was not ready to rehearse as the custody battle over his children and imminent release of Ronaldo and Clara drew most of his attention. Bob kept us sitting around for a week or two, recalls Stoner. He just never showed up, and then when he finally drops in, he's distracted. He was really stressed out. He was always bummed out. He was chain smoking, and he was really in a bad mood. He was short with people. It just wasn't working out. So, I guess Dylan at the best of times, maybe not the easiest person to record with, and a little bit impatient, but this particular period, I think he was maybe particularly agitated or impatient or just a bit lost maybe, and that's one of the reasons he turned to Christianity a few months after this with his trilogy of albums, Later in Coming, Saved and Shot of Love, which are not the subject of this review, but there's several lyrics on this album which kind of point the way that might be the way he's going to go, because there's a lot of religious imagery on several of the tracks, there's a kind of, I wouldn't say a feeling of Armageddon, but there's a sense of foreboding and that all's not that well with the world in the Bob Dylan world. For instance, Signor starts off with the line, Signor, Signor, can you tell me where we're heading? Lincoln County Road or Armageddon? Seems like we've been this way before. Is there any truth in that, Signor? So, what else can we say? It's a pretty long album. It's 50 minutes long. It got to number 11 in the US, number 2 in the UK. And just going through the tracks, Changing of the Guards, plural, is possibly one of my top 10 Dylan songs of all time. It's absolutely brilliant. And the backing vocals work supremely well. It was released as a single, didn't do anything, but that doesn't tell you much. Maybe it wasn't single material, but it's a superb album opener. I would go as far as to say it's one of Bob's best album openers of his entire career, and I would put it maybe in the same bracket as Tangled Up in Blue in that regard. I think those are the two best that come to mind, along with Like a Rolling Stone from Highway 61. So great song, great words. Who knows what they mean? I'm not going to... by the way, one comment on my John Wesley Harding review was terrible review of the songs. This man obviously hasn't done his research into the Anthony Scaduto interview of 71 where Bob explains all the words. Well, yeah, I do read some of these books, and I do read Clinton Halen, and spend some time trying to analyse the lyrics, but I don't analyse it to death, and I wouldn't profess to be an expert of any Dylan lyric, and sometimes what Dylan says about his own songs isn't always the complete truth either. So one, I think, can be a little subjective in what one interprets words to mean in a song. It can take on personal meanings. You can read stuff into it which maybe the artist never intended, but that's all right. I think that's all part of the course. And I don't think there's any definitive interpretation of a song, particularly a song where the words are a little bit ambiguous or hidden meaning and stuff like that. So just thought I'd say that. New Pony, having said that, is pretty obviously a track about Sarah, and not a very pleasant track, if we're honest. She must have loved hearing Sarah from Desire, and in fact they were briefly reconciled after he'd recorded that song. But on this one he's saying, sometimes I wonder what's going on in the mind of Miss X. You know, she's got such a sweet disposition. I never know what the poor girl's going to do to me next. Come over here, Pony. I want to climb up one time on you. Well, you're so nasty and you're so bad, but I love you. Yes, I do. It's kind of, bittersweet. Some of the angst and the, unpleasantness of a divorce creeping into the lyrics there. But I think it's as a song, it's brilliant, and a brilliant sax solo from Steve Douglas, I assume, and a brilliant guitar solo on this track from Billy Cross. I love it. Not everyone's cup of tea. No Time to Think. Clinton Halen described this track as too clever by half, but I think it's well sung, and some of the rhymes are a little bit forced, but I think it's interesting. Judges will haunt you, the cunty priestess will want you, her worst is better than best. I've seen all these decoys through a set of deep turquoise eyes, and I feel so depressed. China doll, alcohol, duality, mortality. Mercury rules you, and destiny fools you like the plague with a dangerous wink. And there's no time to think. I think it's a good song, and I wouldn't be without it. I think it's a good track on side one of here, and then the track side closes with Baby Please Stop Crying, which is probably the closest Bob got to a kind of genuine hit single in the hit parade. It was definitely top 20 in the UK. Not sure about other countries, but it's quite commercial, it's catchy, and again I think the words are charming. Go down to the river, babe, honey, I will meet you there. Go down to the river, babe, honey, I will pay your fare. If you're looking for assistance, babe, or if you just want some company, or if you just want a friend you can talk to, honey, come and see about me. And then the last verse, you've been hurt so many times, and I know what you're thinking of. Well, I don't need to be no doctor, babe, to see that you're madly in love. I think it's a great song, and deserved hit single. Probably why it did so well in the UK charts, number 2. I think it was his highest for a while. Then we turn it, by the way, this Ultimate Record Guide, great though it is, rather disparaging review of Street Legal, again stingy, and it gives Senior 5 stars, it gives Changing the Guard 4, it gives Journey Through Dark Heat 4, and the rest of them 3, with the exception of True Love and Is Your Love in Vain, it gives 2. So woefully underrated album and underscored in that particular magazine, in my opinion. But anyway, this song Is Your Love in Vain, it's come in for a bit of stick over the years because of lines like, can you cook and sew, make flowers grow, can you understand my pain, are you willing to risk it all, or is your love in vain? So a bit kind of sexist lyrics and stuff, and not quite in tune with the feminist times of today, but it's pretty harmless in the grand scheme of things, and I'm not offended by it, and I think it's a beautiful tune, and if one focuses too much on the lyrics and them not being politically correct, I think one misses a beautiful tune, very simple, and it's always got that hilarious, I've always thought a line of this It's hilarious, particularly if John Lennon had heard it during his sabbatical. I think he used to pick up Dylan and McCartney albums and Elton albums and listen to them in the seclusion of his home. And if he'd heard that line, I dined with kings, I've been offered wings, and I've never been too impressed, I think he would have had a good chuckle. So that was my little interpretation of that song. I'm sure it's nothing to do with Paul McCartney and Wings, but it was quite amusing anyway. Signor is, possibly one of the strongest tracks on the album, deserved of 5 stars in that magazine, but no better than Changing of the Guards. And but great musicianship and great imagery. And then, the last thing I remember before I stripped and kneeled was that trainload of fools bogged down in a magnetic field. A gypsy with a broken flag and a flashing ring said, "Son, this ain't a dream no more, it's the real thing. Signor, you know their hearts is as hard as leather. Well, give me a minute, let me get it together. Just gotta pick myself up off the floor. I'm ready when you are, Signor." I can't resist reading out the last verse. Signor, let's disconnect these cables, overturn these tables. This place don't make sense to me no more. Can you tell me what we're waiting for, Signor? Great lyric. Who knows what it means, but it's generic and it can be applied to any one of different meanings, and I love it. True Love Tends to Forget is not perhaps the strongest track on the album, but again, superbly played by the band, and a lovely guitar solo in the middle, and pretty heartfelt lyrics, pretty straight lyrics, not too mysterious here. It's a song about regret, relationship breaking up, and the regret comes with that. So rather than the bitterness, Bob is looking back regretfully, fondly, in contrast to some of the other songs on the album. We Better Talk This Over is kind of halfway in between the bitterness and the regret. I love the first line. I think we better talk this over, maybe when we both get sober. Because, as most of you may know, if you're in a relationship and you're having problems, the last thing you need is to be drinking, because it tends to exacerbate arguments between the two of you and doesn't make the situation any better. And then the next verse, this situation can only get rougher. Why should we needlessly suffer? Let's call it a day, go our own different ways before we decay. You don't have to be afraid of looking into my face. We've done nothing to each other that time will not erase. And then later on, why should we go on watching each other through a telescope? Eventually we'll hang ourselves on all this tangled rope. I love it. And think of me and fantasize on what we never had. Be grateful for what we shared together and be glad. It's very philosophical and a lovely lyric, and doesn't get much talked about, this track, but I think We Better Talk It Over is a highlight of the album. And then the album finishes very strongly with Where Are You Tonight? Journey Through Dark Heat in brackets. Brilliant song, brilliantly played, and with lyrics again, just I don't know how he writes song after song with mysterious words. I left town at dawn with Marcel and St. John. Strong men battled, belittled by doubt. I couldn't tell her what my private thoughts were, but she had some way of finding them out. He took dead center aim, but he missed just the same. She was waiting, putting flowers on the shelf. She could feel my despair as I climbed up her hair and discovered her invisible self. There's a lion in the road, there's a demon escaped, there's a million dreams gone, there's a landscape being raped. As her beauty fades and I watch her undrape, I won't, but then again, maybe I might. Oh, if I could just find you tonight. Again, more in the spirit of regret than bitterness, this track. And the title says it all, Where Are You Tonight? Brackets, Journey Through Dark Heat. He was suffering in the post-divorce period for a bit, anyway. Eventually found happiness again, yes, but during this, rocky period, which maybe can be extended all the way back to the Rolling Thunder period and the Blood on the Tracks period. He was not the happiest of campers. That split from Sarah hit him hard, even if not all of the songs on here are directly about that, or even the Blood on the Tracks songs, Bob says, not necessarily about that. Certainly tempting to read the songs of this period. A lot of them are about, I think, about his personal situation, but who knows? So that was Street Legal, now out on new vinyl for the first time since 1978. I don't think it's been specifically remastered for this reissue, and there's no bonus tracks or archive edition or anything like that, but it's lovely to have it on new vinyl. And it's one of my top albums of all time, so I thought I'd better revisit it. Thank you for watching. See you next time.